going to begin recording. So thanks for taking a few moments to spend with us today. Today's webinar is going to be around the final paperwork for credential endorsement visits and what the role of the advisor is. So the first thing that The first thing that I think will be most helpful, and if you can see my computer screen, that's probably going to be the best, is the ready for assessment form. So in case you didn't know, on page 56 of the manual, there is a ready for assessment checklist. And this is really what everyone should be using before they begin to get all of their students' paperwork in for them. So the checklist again goes through everything that needs to be sent in and how it needs to be sent in. I'm going to review this sheet really quickly and then talk about how you should mail them in, and then we'll talk about each piece individually. So the first thing is the request for visit form, the prep course application, the student's resume, the advisor instrument, the advisor summary, a copy of the portfolio with the family questionnaires, the goals, and the recommendation letters. All of that can be emailed in. And then the voucher or their check for the $1,000 has to be mailed in. We have a lot of issues with people trying to email these in. The EIP voucher, we have to have the original. And again, I'll remind you again later when we get to that piece. All right. So the request for visit form is one of the first things that we look for when you send your students work in or when they send it in. The big things I want you to see is where the signatures are. So the first signature is for the student, and you'll note on the bottom it says all work submitted is their own. We do have some issues sometimes with individuals submitting other people's work. So this is just kind of helping us in the end to make sure that if we compare something and it doesn't belong to the student, then we have grounds to not give them their credential. The other piece down here is for the advisor. So this is where you're going to sign off. And this is where you're going to sign off saying that the student is ready for their visit. The last piece is the program director name. And this is just for the program director stating that they know that that someone is coming into their space. Just so you know, we'll be updating this form, and actually it might be already updated in the 2018 form, but the host agency instructor is going to have to sign this form in the near future. So if you're using a manual that does not have it on there, that's fine. But moving forward, the host agency will have to sign the form as well. Oh wait, I lied. It is on there now. It's right here. Does anyone have any questions about the request for visit form? Anyone?
No.
Okay.
Just on
Great.
Just here.
So, not letting me move forward. All right. So before the paperwork comes to us, you're going to need to verify that everything on page 56 has been completed. You're going to assign, or you're going to sign the 3.1 form before the candidate submits it. This form, so you know, isn't a statement of the candidate's competence. Your signature indicates only that you have completed your responsibilities and the candidate is ready for his or her visit. If you have a student that you don't think is ready for the visit and that has completed all of the work, you're going to really want to talk to them about postponing sending in their paperwork, because if they don't make it through the first time, they will have to pay that $1,000 assessment fee again. So I would encourage you, if the student is not ready, to try to talk them out of going through the next step in the process. If you've talked about it and they still insist on applying for their assessment, you're going to want to make sure that someone at the network knows, and you can probably put that in right at the bottom of your advisor summary. Any questions about your responsibilities?
No.
Okay, and here's just some things that may qualify the candidate to not be ready. If the documentation isn't complete, if you haven't completed your tasks, and if you're still finding that, you know, there's significant improvement that's needed. And again, like I said, you know, if you don't think the candidate is ready and they are insistent that you submit their paperwork, you're going to want to let us know, and you're going to want to let the student know that if they don't make it through, they're going to have to pay again.
Okay.
All right. The next thing on the list is the prep course application. This is the form that everyone should be submitting. Some look a little bit different depending on the host agency, but this is what that form should look like. This form gives the endorser information regarding where the program is located, the number of children, just to give the endorser a little bit of information before they walk into the program. Has everyone seen this form before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or something that looks like it anyways? Great.
No,
All right, a resume. Oh, resumes are also included in the portfolio now. So you just want to make sure that the student has an up-to-date resume. Some host agencies, so you know, do this as a part of their coursework. Others do not. So this may be challenging for some individuals that haven't had assistance with this in the past. Again, we want to make sure that it's up to date so that once the individuals are done with the credential, should they want to move program sites, they are prepared to do that. All right. The next piece of the puzzle is the advisor instrument. As many of you may have seen, we did make some changes to this last year, so now we can see the dates and the start and end times of all of those observations. Nothing has changed in terms of when you need to do your visits. So your visits must be within one program year and at least 3 weeks apart. And we recommend that each of these observations are 2 hours each. We get a lot of questions regarding the one program year. Should your student start, you know, a course in, let's say, January, and their course doesn't end until December? We understand that that's over 2 program years. That's fine. What we don't want happening is, you know, students doing one advisement, you know, in 2015 and then coming back and just wanting 2 advisement visits in 2018. This is just to make sure that all of the information in your tool is reflective of the current work. Different colored ink, again, so you're going to want to make sure that each of those visits is done in 3 different colors, and that should be reflective when you write in the date of the observation on the first page. It's important that you use the 3 different colors of ink so that we can see the growth of the student, as well as we can see what different things that you saw on each of the visits. So what's important on this piece of paper is that when you do send the information into the network, when you scan it, it should be scanned in color so that we can see that and that information can be passed along to the endorser as well. Each of the competency standards need to be rated and have notes, and those bolded indicators must also have notes. that the endorser is going to be taking a look at your tool. And a lot of times those bolded indicators are things that the endorser will not see in just one visit. So those indicators must absolutely have notes. Any questions about the observation instrument?
No, pretty straightforward.
Great. If on the tool you had I's written in, you need to have follow-up notes. So that I means interview, and that just means, that tells us that that's something that you didn't see, and that's something that you had to ask the candidate. Most of the indicators should be checked off, but all of them don't need to be checked off. Remember, indicators are the way to get to the standard. So if there are things that the student is not meeting or things that aren't applicable, that's okay, as long as the standard is rated. I just want to go back to those 2-hour visits, 3 weeks apart. What I will say in my experience is that many times 3 observations is not enough. If you do a 4th observation or a 5th observation, as long as you have 3 that are completed 2 weeks apart, you are fine. We typically get a lot of questions about that. There's some confusion. Is everyone understanding that?
Yeah.
And again, just a reminder, when the student goes to send in their work, the advisor observation instrument must be scanned in color so that the endorser can read it in color. The next piece of the puzzle is that advisor summary. This is one of the first things that the endorser typically reads, and it gives them an overview of the candidate's progress and where they're at. You should have notes in most of the areas. So where it says candidate strengths and where it says candidate growth needs. So you can see, if you can see my screen, there's an example there. So again, a couple bullets, it doesn't need to be written out in long sentences. It just needs to be enough information for the endorser to be able to get an overview. The most important piece on this is where it says competent and needs more training. You must fill this out because this is what the endorser uses for that 3rd vote during the endorsement visit. When you check that a student is competent, you are checking that you feel they are competent. When you're checking that they need more training, you are checking that it's not necessarily that they are incompetent. It's more about they would benefit from more training in this area. So again, you're going to note their current strengths, suggest areas for improvement, and record your vote. Any additional comments or concerns should be written at the bottom of this form. And again, that might be where you make note that maybe something weird happened, maybe the student has some kind of special needs, so the endorser should know that when they're reading their portfolio and resource file. Maybe it's that you did 1 visit at the end of the school year and the other 2 visits, towards at the beginning of the next school year. So any pertinent information that the endorser or the network should know should go in that comments section. Questions about the summary?
No.
The next thing is the portfolio. So I've listed here all of the items that should be in the portfolio. The autobiography should be in there, the description of the program, the 3 journal entries, and reminder, each of those 3 journal entries for each of those 14 skill areas need to be different standards and different indicators. So again, the student should be picking a standard and an indicator. another standard and a different indicator, and a third standard and another indicator. As advisors, we want to keep track of what the students are writing about, because we know some of the skill areas kind of overlap. And what we don't want to see is a portfolio with 12 different entries around their learning centers. So as advisors, you're going to want to keep track of what they're writing about and make sure that each one is different. The short and long-term goals for each of those skill areas. We'll talk about that momentarily. The completed family questionnaires. This is another one that we get a lot of questions about. In the manual, it does say we want at least 10 family questionnaires or 25% of the questionnaires you distributed, whichever number is higher. That being said, if you're in a program with 8 kids and you only have 5 families, then you want to make sure, that you're getting about 25% of them. What we don't want to see is a program of 150 children and, 5 questionnaires returned. And then the final thing is those 2 letters of recommendations. Those can be from parents of the children in your families or in your programs. The letter just really needs to speak to the student's competence. We want to know that the families like that student. We want to know, what types of activities and those types of things that the program and the student is offering. Quite honestly, I've seen these letters come in typed. I've seen printed out emails. I've seen letters written on a piece of lined paper. We're not picky. We really just want to see that the families are in favor of these students going through the process. All right. The next thing. So when you're going through the students' portfolio entries, they must use the template. So that template is available in the manual. Basically, they're writing their name at the top, the skill area, and then it's going to be entry number 1, 2, or 3. Below that, we want to see the date that they wrote it. And then we want to see the standard written out. So the standard needs to be there. Then the what did you do and when did you do it? This is where they're going to write the indicator. So typically this first sentence is an indicator underneath the standard. And then they just need to answer the questions. Anybody have any questions about what you're looking for in the student's portfolio entries?
No.
No.
And again, they should be about a page long.
Same time.
We don't want entries longer than a page because the endorsers do have to read through them. All right. The next thing is the goals. This tends to be tricky, and as advisors, it is your responsibility to make sure that the students have goals that are written well. Again, all of them are going to have a short and a long-term goal for each of the skill areas. Your short term is going to be within 6 months, and your long term is going to be within 3 years. They need to be measurable, they need to be specific, they need to be achievable, relevant, and timely. If you have questions regarding how to set up goals with them, there is a page in the manual that covers the goals. Questions about goals?
No.
All right. All right, the next thing is the questionnaire. So this questionnaire that you should be able to see on my screen right now is the questionnaire that they need to use. A lot of times we get questions regarding whether they can use a a questionnaire that they already have or a survey that they already have? Unfortunately, the answer is no. This is the questionnaire that they have to use. If they would like to reformat it, if they want to put it in a Survey Monkey and send it out to their parents that way, it's fine as long as we can get the results and be able to read them. Just so you know, I do have somebody working on translating this questionnaire into Spanish. And as soon as I get that, I will send that out and make that available to everybody. If you have other languages, students that are, working in programs that predominantly speak other languages, certainly let me know and we can work on that as well. Questions about the questionnaires?
No.
All right. All right, the next thing is the letter of recommendation that we already talked to. Again, like I said, we see a variety of them come. Really, they just need to have 2. They need to be from families of children in the program, and they need to speak to competence of the individual who's taking the course. Checks. This gets confusing for individuals. So again, checks need to be made payable to the network. It needs to go to 415 River Street in Troy, which is right on the bottom of the request for visit form. The check needs to have the candidate's name in the notes line. What happens is a lot of times they come in from organizations and we can't figure out who it goes to, and then the endorsement visit gets pushed back because we don't know. So just make sure that the candidate's name is somewhere in the notes line or in the envelope that they send it in. Also note that endorsement visits do not get scheduled until both the paperwork and the payment has been made. Your EIP vouchers. They need to be mailed to the network, and we can only accept originals. So here's where it gets confusing. If you take a look down here at the bottom, it says mail original award with signature to EIP. Students typically get confused and start to mail it to EIP, but they need to mail it to us first because we need to sign it down here, and then I mail it to EIP. So again, they need to sign in the awardee spot, date it, and then send it to us. They should not hold on to this because if we don't get it back to EIP within 30 days, it becomes invalidated, and then they have to do the process over again. These vouchers are good for the entire year. So if you have anyone that's thinking that they're going to have their endorsement visit in the 2019 year, then they can start filling out their EIP applications now. If you're not familiar with EIP and need assistance with that, you are certainly more than welcome to call or email me, and I can walk you through that process. Questions about EIP vouchers?
Only one. If they submitted for 2019 and something happened where they're not able to, does that mean they can fill out another EIP, or it's only a one-shot deal?
Nope. So if something happens and they don't end up finishing, what happens is at the end of the year, I have a list of people who's came into us, and then we will return the money to EIP, but they would have to apply for the following year.
Got it.
So they can certainly apply again, but it takes a little bit to reverse all of that. But it's certainly doable, and it happens to probably a handful of people each year.
And EIP is based on income by tax form, correct?
So good question. For the assessment visit, as long as they work in a licensed or registered program, they do not have to meet any financial guidelines for the assessment. For the courses they do, but for the assessment, there's no financial guidelines.
And when you refer to license, you're speaking in terms of DOH?
So, yep, so they have to have a school age, school credential, hold on, get all mixed up. They need to have a SAC license. Yep, so under Department of Health, OCFS.
Got it.
Any other questions about EIPs? Because they can be tricky.
I think Oil has a question just pop up on the screen.
Oh, how come I didn't see it? Hang on one second. Oh, there it is. Okay, so if a candidate needs, if their company is paying for it or if the individual is paying for it, they can email me and I can get them an invoice ahead of time. All right. Great. Any other questions about EIPs? All right.
I think OL just asked another one.
Oh, didn't. Okay, hold on. Let's see. So it says, so anyone getting an endorser visit could get EIP. So anyone in a licensed or registered program may qualify to get EIP. I would encourage them certainly to fill out the application. But again, it's not based on financial income. But they must be working in a licensed or registered program. All right. The final packet. So once you have everything on that page 56, the final packets are all only being accepted via email now. So in the past, you might remember that you copied everything and mailed it in. We are no longer doing that because we have found that email has sped up the process. So all packets need to be emailed to me. And my email address is there, and it's also on the bottom of all of the forms. It needs to come in one email or a couple. Portfolio certainly needs to be in one file. We just kind of piloted this, and last year I saw some portfolios coming in like 50-something different emails. It needs to be in one file. So if they have it in a Word document, you're going to want to either make sure that it's in one Word document or scan it all into one PDF file. All the rest of the paperwork needs to come in a PDF file. Some individuals have been able to zip their files. Some individuals have done it through Google Docs and provided a link. So we certainly have options, but it needs to be in as few emails as possible and as few files as possible. I'm hopeful that at some point in the future we'll figure out some kind of portal system, but we're not quite there yet. So again, in as few files as possible, and if you have trouble emailing it and you're having problems, then certainly just give me a call and we can, work that out. The first email that you send does need to say request for visit with the candidate's name. This way it doesn't get lost in the 1,000 emails a day that I get. And everything needs to be scanned in the order of the checklist, and in the order that the portfolio and the resource file goes. I lied to you. The resource file does not need to be scanned ahead of time, but some individuals do choose to send it ahead of time. That's fine, but it's not a requirement. But everything else does need to be scanned in the order of the checklist. Any questions about what needs to be sent?
No.
And then students need to keep their original portfolio in their original resource file. So when the endorser comes out on the day of the visit, the student should have their original portfolio there for them to look at, and they will also need to have their original resource file. And again, it needs to be available the day of the visit. All right. Last couple of things. So timelines. We do not do summer visits anymore. This has been for the last probably 3 or 4 years. The reason that there are no summer visits anymore is because summer typically looks different than what the after-school program looks like. And when we did have endorsers go out to do summer visits, we were finding that the candidates were struggling getting through the process. So to make sure that individuals were being successful, we decided no more summer visits. If a student wants a visit by the end of the year, the request for a visit, payment, and all paperwork, ooh, that's a typo, needs to be submitted by 11/1. So November 1st is the deadline, and it is right on the for visit form. To ensure a visit before the end of the school year, all paperwork and payment needs to be submitted by 5/1. Now, this also gets confusing to people. They certainly can submit requests for visits after 5/1. We just can't guarantee them a visit before the end of the school year. So if they do submit one after 5/1, then they will be scheduled for a fall visit. Same thing with the 11/1 date. We can do a visit after 12/31. We just can't ensure that it's done by the end of the year. This is the one when you submit by 11/1 where it gets a little bit tricky, because if they have EIP vouchers, the EIP voucher needs to be used by 12/31. So if they don't get that request for a visit form in by 11/1, chances are they won't get a visit before 12/31, and then they'll have to reapply for EIP. And again, any paperwork coming in after the deadlines, we do try our best to get endorsers. We assign endorsers on a first come, first served basis. And we do our best to try to get them, but those end of the year times tend to be tricky, as well as the end of the school year. Do you have any questions regarding timelines?
No.
No.
All right. Anyone have any other questions regarding advisement?
No, not really.
Okay. Anyone have any tips that they would like to share around advisement or paperwork? Moving on. How about anything that's going well? Do we have any new advisors or experienced advisors that would like to talk about any of their experiences? This is your time. We got a quiet group today. All right. And then I just wanted to give you a couple reminders. So we do have a conference coming up on May 10th and 11th. There's information on our website. Certainly, if you'd like more information, let me know and I can send it to you. But this is a great opportunity for individuals to get some high quality PD. For those of you that don't know, we do have the Network for Youth Success has a Facebook page. And on that Facebook page, we give updates around professional development. Every day there are resources to activities, which are probably good resources for your students working on their resource files or planning program. On the Facebook page, we also have a school-age credential professionals group where they're able to share experiences as well as share activities, things that work, things that haven't worked. So I would certainly encourage all of you as advisors to get on our Facebook page as well as our SAC credential professionals group so you know what's going on. And utilize the resources that are available to you. And then the last thing I want to remind you is, as advisors, you are all required to maintain your membership to the network. So certainly make sure that you're keeping up to date on that, because if you do lose your membership, then you're not allowed to do advisement anymore.
Gotcha.
And that's all I got for today. Any last questions? Anybody need me for anything?
No.
All right, well, you guys can have 20 minutes of your day back. I appreciate your time, and certainly, you know, if you need anything from me, feel free to call or email me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay.